there's important tips we're going to share for you how to act, how to avoid problems, how to avoid surprises throughout a purchase process. And at the end, I'm going to give you the tips that I think are most relevant for those of you who are really serious about buying and say, I want to buy something in the near future, in the next month. So what should you do during the month of July? I'm going to give you a few of my thoughts as well there. Everything I share comes from a combination of obviously a deep knowledge of the property market, how it works, what the different players do in the market, but obviously about from practice. We're every single day visiting properties for our customers. We're every single day negotiating, going to a notary every week for different buyers. So there'll be a lot of examples as well throughout the session. So here we go. Brief introduction, Inspire. I mentioned already, our goal is to help you find better properties, pay less for them, but above all, avoid that you make mistakes in the Spanish market. A few examples are coming later. We have a few polls as well, a few questions for you as well to see how much you know about the market, but it's kind of an all-in package, a safety pack that we offer to our customers. It's all about buying. We do help clients sell property when they ask for this, and there's examples of things that this is Barcelona, from rather inexpensive 160K properties with a little terrace up to nicer atticos and so on. This all people who have bought through us in the past. They're at a different stage in their life now, and they want to sell and buy something else or buy something bigger. So let's dive into the core part of this webinar. What is happening in the market today? First point we see is international buyers are coming back to the market. They are back, and they were absent until more or less Easter. Obviously, the travel restrictions, the COVID constraints made that many people simply could not come and travel to Spain, to Barcelona. They could not visit properties, therefore didn't buy many properties. We see a lot more clients now, international clients, again on the market. We see more transactions are going up as well, but also when we look at our pipeline internally, we see a lot more demand coming as well. That's an indication that demand, international demand is up, is going to, I think, continue to go up in the market. And that's both people that already live in Spain, expats that are renting and say, wait a minute, with the interest rates going up and I have some savings, it's a lot better for me to buy a property. So we see that group. That group was also active during the last 2 years. And the second group who was not active, but is active again now, is the international buyers. We see a lot of people coming from the US now to buy second residences, lifestyle apartments, for instance, in Barcelona or on the coast, etc. We're going to launch a quick poll. There's a question going to pop up on your screen, and it's a very simple question. Where are you resident at the moment? This helps me because the property market is different across the globe. This helps me to pick examples and to give you an indication there. So can we launch the poll? Is it there? Okay. So I don't see this for some reason. Okay, so take a minute to answer, please. Okay, and I'm going to share my screen again and continue. Can you read me the answer? Okay. Okay, as you respond, we continue. So international buyers are back. What this means is that where 6 months ago you could be alone when you went to visit the property, but no other candidate buyers at the same time, at the same appointment, seeing the property. This is changing now. We see again when you go and visit, there's 1-2 other international buyers often there. And that means competition for the same property, potential competition, which means you need quicker decisions if you like the property, which means you might have less negotiation power as well. Another point we see is interest rates are going up. Of course, when you read the news, it's obvious that banks are raising interest rates partially to fight inflation. This is happening in Spain as well, and mortgages therefore become more expensive. But let's put this in context here. This is what you often see in the news. So you see, so the red circle here is this year, January, and it looks like a massive spike, an increase in interest rates, and it went up. But look, they were in the last year at minus 0.5%, the Euribor, so the reference interest rate, and they're now around close to 1%. But let's zoom out. And if you look at the same chart, but I look at the last 20 years, what we see today is this, what you see at the tail of the chart, okay? So we saw interest rates 3, 4, 5% over the last 20 years. Of course, they dropped during the crisis after 2008. But again, so put it into context, because some people are very worried that I need to buy today because the interest rates are going up. Yes, it's true, they are going up, and they will probably continue to go up this year. But in perspective, this is where we are. Okay. Related to, so interest rates are for those people who finance a purchase logically, but the banks, if you need to work with a bank in Spain, you need a bank for two things. One is for opening a bank account, obviously, because you need to have an active bank account in Spain to buy a property. Second is if you take a mortgage. Banks are collapsed today in Spain. I think it's a strong word, but it's the reality. They don't have capacity to respond to their clients' needs. Opening a bank account is still okay because it's rather quickly, rather fast and easy. Getting a mortgage is extremely complex. There is obviously, together with the increase in transactions in the last months, property transactions, purchase transactions, there is an increase in mortgages as well because interest rates were very low, and the banks are restructuring. There's acquisitions taking place. They're firing people. We have very good relationships at a lot of different banks in Spain at senior decision maker level. And many of those people, they just say, Raf, we can't handle the situation anymore. What does this mean for you? It's a big problem for you as a buyer if you need a mortgage. We have been renegotiating arras contracts, purchase agreements, earnest money agreements with the seller, simply because the bank couldn't get a mortgage internally approved and couldn't submit a binding offer for a mortgage. And that's complex. It's not fun for the selling party because they start to doubt, they might lose trust in the transaction. This is not happening in one case. We see this that's happening for different customers, for different buyers. It's one of the things that I would recommend to you if you are to take a mortgage in Spain, if you want to take a mortgage here, is start very early with requesting mortgage simulations to different banks, so that the banks have you in their systems and they know you already, and then they can quicker react. But secondly, build in additional time in your purchase timelines. What I mean by that is, normally when you reserve a property, then you do the due diligence, and 1 or 2 weeks later you sign an arras contract, earnest money agreement, and you pay 10% to the owner, and then a month and a half, 2 months later, you should have the keys in your hand. You just complete at the notary. That's not sufficient anymore, this timeline. Extend it. Okay, it's very important because you will save a lot of problems. You see this actually here. There's some data news as well. So the number of foreign buyers in the first quarter of this year nearly doubled. It didn't really. Idealista said it. Idealista is the largest property site in Spain. It nearly doubled. But it means that there were, if you take the first quarter of the year, every working hour, and I took 40 working hours a week, 60 people, international people, are buying a property in Spain. That's massive. That's a lot. So when you have your coffee in the morning, during that time, another 60 people stop doubting. They put a signature on the purchase of a property in Spain. That's big numbers. Other things we see here is, there's a few graphs here because I like them because they're visual. This is also new. We work a lot with American buyers. But if you have today savings in US dollars, and you buy a property in Spain, today, for the same amount of US dollars, you get 20% more euros than 1.5 years ago, in January 2021. That's what you see in this chart here. The dollars can just a lot stronger. That makes a big difference. You either just pay less for your property, or you can afford suddenly a lot nicer property. Maybe you can suddenly afford that penthouse with a terrace or with a nicer view, or the house on the coast with a swimming pool and a view instead of a regular house. So that is for, I think, if you have savings in US dollars or your income in US dollars, interesting. We see banks as well in Spain now that start to offer mortgages in US dollars. So you can open a bank account in Spain at the Spanish bank, a US dollar bank account, and then have your mortgage in US dollars. Things that didn't happen that much in the past. Okay, the same type of graph exists for other currencies, but the effects on the dollar is way stronger. Also, the Swiss franc became stronger as an example, or the Canadian dollar, of course, as well, but not to this extent. So this is a strong advantage if you want to buy. Okay, where are we price-wise? Because you read a lot about the prices are going up or they might go down, but again, in perspective, again, the last 20 years, because property markets, you need to, when you take a decision to buy a property, it's by definition for me, it's a midterm or long-term decision. So you need to look at 3, 4, 5 years at least. So you see here that prices are going up, and I think they have potential to keep going up during this year as well, but we're still pretty far away from the peak in 2008. So that is just a perspective on where are we with the property prices. And people see this, of course, because in Spain, prices did not go up during COVID. Prices went down during COVID in the last 2 years in general. And certainly prices for nice houses on the coast or good apartments at very central locations in the center, they went down because there were no international buyers. And the Spanish economy was hit very, very hard by COVID, because a big part of the economy is tourism. So in many other cities across the globe, the opposite happened. And we saw prices in Northern Europe, we saw prices rocketing. People in Northern Europe, they often, when there's a property for sale, you pay 5, 6, 10, maybe 12% more than the asking price. It's an auction just to get the property secured for you. In Spain, you bid lower. Typically, you bid under the asking price to secure your property. Okay. So that is okay. There's a question here, I think. Yeah, there's someone who says, where is Q1 2022 on this graph? This graph actually has it on there, but it's not on the scale. This graph is, I took the data this morning. So 2021 is actually a bit more to the left, and 2022 is included here. Okay. More things happening. So yeah, so what I want to say is here, people that live in, if you live in the US, for instance, where property prices are going up, and in Spain, they've been going down over the last 2 years, the gap is only becoming larger, right? If you live in Paris, where an average property is around 10,000 euro per square meter, and you come to Barcelona, where you can find good properties for 5K per square meter, that makes a difference. And in people's mind, a lot of people still see Barcelona as an inexpensive city for property. And there's a final element here that I'm going to talk about now, and that's inflation. Inflation today is unseen in recent decades. What does inflation do? We don't have a crystal ball here, but that's the inflation graph you see here. But typically, property tends to be a good hedge against inflation, good protection against inflation. Because when you buy, and certainly when you buy a property with a mortgage, you can, with fixed interest rates, you can lock in your purchase costs. Your property can appreciate in value, can increase in value over time. If you rent it out, your rent can be indexed to consumer price index, some exceptions. So that's interesting, because rent can go up, buying cost stays the same, property market can improve. So that is why we expect, why we see as well an increase in demand from buyers, not only international buyers, for properties. We have clients today, and when we ask them in an initial conversation, we ask them, why do you want to buy? What is your driver? And what they say is something I didn't hear a year ago, and they say, to preserve capital. That's the main reason for many people. Put the money in property and not having it on the bank account. So, conscious of time, we talked about more international buyers. Let me tell you a bit more on what I think is guidelines that you might want to use or keep in mind at least. So, more international buyers, you've got to be prepared. A lot of people buy decisions without too much thinking. They take emotional buy decisions, and that might be fine. They probably overpay as well, but it means they take fast decisions sometimes. You need to be able to take fast decisions, but without losing the rational analysis of the property, without taking on risks. And that's what we do with our customers from the very first moment, making sure that everything that's possible is prepared. So when you or us, we find a great property, you can take a decision the same day, we can submit an offer the same day, we can benchmark it and start negotiating it, and conditionally reserve it for you. If you're not prepared, if you don't know which banks can finance you, if you don't know, if you didn't see enough properties, if you're unsure about if this is good in the market or not, if this compares well in the market, you won't take a decision and you will lose properties because the good properties to sell. And it's very frustrating because if you've done 5 or 10 visits to apartments or houses, and then every time you like one, you're too late, it's frustrating. And it's not how you want to start your dream. Interest rates. So strong recommendation, go for fixed interest rates if the bank is offering it to you. Sometimes only variable rates are possible for some profiles. With the banks, I mentioned already, third point here, built in additional time in your contracts, set expectations with the selling party, but there's a legal element which is very important to this, and that's what our lawyers do or need to do before you sign such a contract, or create appendixes to previously agreed agreements to keep protecting you. Because it's very simple in Spain. If you sign an earnest money agreement, you pay 10%. If you don't buy by the agreed maximum date, you lose your 10%. So build that protection in, because you don't want to lose this 10%. So exchange rates, we talked about this. Keep this in mind if you didn't do this yet. And the property prices where we are. The graph you saw is a general graph, average prices for Spain. You've got to be careful with average numbers. To secure the best deal, you will be competing for a specific segment of properties, the segment that international buyers or investors like. And it's a specific segment in the market where the prices will not that quickly drop, I think, in the next months, because demand is there. And again, it's here to be ready to take a decision without risks. The notary in Spain is not doing any due diligence on the property, is not giving you any guarantees. You need a lawyer, but you can very easily buy or have a very good lawyer and still buy the wrong property. Because a lawyer is doing some legal checks. The lawyer is not visiting the property. Lawyer doesn't worry about the property market, the trend, if it's expensive or not. The lawyer is not negotiating for you. Lawyer doesn't know how the street is after midnight, and so on. So that is things where we provide additional guidance or recommendations for you. Also, when a property, when you like a property and we like it, the first thing we do is a price benchmark on it with big data tools and based on experience as well, to know if you think where should we land the property in terms of the price, or when should we walk away from it. Okay. if you're serious about buying, I'm going to open up for questions now. If you're serious about buying a property in the near future, let's have a conversation. I offer 30 minutes of my time for free. It's a one-to-one Zoom meeting, just you and I. I need some upfront information from yourself so that the meeting is productive. Happy to have a chat. And so just to be clear, we are based in Barcelona. We help, a lot of our customers are for Barcelona, of course, Barcelona and surrounding areas, meaning Sitges, the Costa Brava, the Costa Brava, but also we work on the Costa Blanca and Murcia on the coast where there's a lot of international buyers as well. Drop us an email and happy to set up such a session. Let's open up for questions. I'm going to look at the chat function here. I've never done such a short webinar. It's always, I always use a lot more examples. Okay. There's a question about the price graph. What is the source of this graph? This graph came from Tinsa. Tinsa is one of the largest valuation agencies in Spain, so independent appraisal companies. Their data are good for showing trends. They're not necessarily the data would use to decide on the value of a property, of a specific property, but it's good for showing trends. Another question here. I see UCI, so UCI is a mortgage provider. I see UCI who is dealing with loans, changing the terms August 1st. Is there anything that what is the major change, or the percentage or something else also? So all banks are changing terms very frequently these days. I'm going to stop sharing so you see me here. In the past, the bank would give a binding offer to you as a buyer, and this binding offer would be valid for a month and a half. Banks wouldn't make a problem of that. Today, often binding offers are valid for 15 days. So because things are changing in the banks, they don't want to assume the risks of on their sides. The banks are becoming more selective, and this is in general, with who they finance. But if you have a decent amount of savings, meaning at least 20% of the purchase price, and you have recurring, stable, therefore predictable income, banks are very happy to finance, though. They're very happy. What is changing is the interest rates on one side, upwards. The other part is some banks, even banks in the past, did not start to charge more additional fees or commissions, whatever you call it. For instance, when you pay back your mortgage early, there might be a penalty, a commission you pay 1%, 1.5% to 0, sometimes 0 as well. Or set arrangement fees for mortgage. So that's where we see it, where we see the situation happening. I mean, Stanley, we talked about it, I think in the past already. So happy to have another one-to-one conversation, or even together to talk to the bank. Can you tell me about the rental market presently in Barcelona? Yeah, rental market, Martin, hi. Rental market has changed significantly because in the last 2 years, no internationals in Barcelona. Rental properties, a lot of rental properties were rented for periods between 1 day and 1 year. That demand collapsed. There's no demand anymore. Many of these properties came on the sales market. Other properties went into long-term rentals, meaning 5 years in Spain or 7 years if it's a company. At the moment, there's legislation changes as well. So there was a cap on the rentals. The cap on the rental prices has been removed now. So you can again freely decide your rental price, which is good for investors, and I think this is logic, I think, in terms of protecting private ownership. There is a temporary restriction now because of the inflation that you can't increase prices more than, I think it's 2% or so. It's a temporary decision that is for Barcelona. But that is kind of where we are on the rental market. Again, demand is back here. We see very strong, there's 3 segments in the rental markets: tourist rentals, let's say Airbnb; long-term rentals on the other side of the spectrum, 5 years; and then the middle market, so anything between 1 month and 11 months. temporary rentals, and that segment is boosting again. So that's international people coming here. There's a lot of Americans coming here because in 2024, this American Cup, the yacht race taking place, we see people already here now doing preparation. They come for 3 months, etc. So that segment is very active again. Interesting segment for investors, by the way, because it's less regulated and a lot more flexibility. Okay. Anna's asking me, are there many Danes, Scandinavians in the Barcelona area? I think short answer is yes. And they also have, as far as I know, there's a community and they're active, but Scandinavians are an active group of international buyers, like certain styles of properties, often on the higher end of the price scale. But yes, very, very active. We have many clients from those countries. Okay, good questions. Let me continue. Again, I try and give short answers, conscious of time. If you're serious about buying a property, send us an email. I'll set up a one-to-one conversation, and that's for free. What kind of specific simulation or pre-approval document is needed from the banks prior to purchase? What you need in the end is what they call a binding offer, or FEIN, FEIN in Spanish. When you sign that document, the bank cannot pull back. Then the bank is committed. That's a document that gives you certainty about your mortgage, and therefore certainty that you can buy the property with the financing that you need. If you can get that, there's a timing element here. If you can get that binding offer before you sign an earnest money contract, an arras contract in Spanish, that's ideal, because then you don't put your 10% payment at risk. Now, today it's very difficult to get that document before your arras contract, because banks need time, and you don't know. You only know a few weeks before you sign such a contract that you will buy that property, because you just negotiated it. So the banks can't run this in 2 weeks. What is in many cases sufficient is that you get email confirmation from the banks that you qualify for a mortgage, that their risk department has looked at your profile and they say, okay, green light. What is not okay is if you go to a bank and they say, don't worry, you can get 20% finance just once you have a property, come back to us. That's a commercial trick from banks, because they know it takes time, and once you find a property, you don't have time to compare other banks anymore because it goes slowly. So you need to make sure they have all your documentation, payslips, bank account extracts, ID documents, passports, not yet a property, because you don't know yet the property, what property you will buy. Maybe a sample. We often use sample properties with banks to run a simulation on a representative property. But they need to look at all your information, and then based on that say what is possible. Is it true that if anybody breaks into my apartment in Spain and he will confirm that he is there more than 48 hours, I have a problem to get him away from my apartment? Yeah, short answer, yes. Squatters is a problem. It's also, I think, a focus problem for a certain type of property. Squatters like properties that are bank owned. Squatters like properties in new developments that have just been finalized but not been sold yet, so it's easy to get in. We haven't had the experience with any of our clients, luckily. I think the risk is, if you buy at a good location, the risk is fairly manageable. Now, there's a very simple way to control this. You put an alarm system in place, and if somebody enters, 1 second later, you get a picture of who's entering your property. The alarm company, Securitas or whoever, they go there, and the police goes with them. And then it's less than 48 hours, logically, you can get them out very easily then. If you detect it later, it's more complicated. And then there's either the legal way, or there is the mediation way, trying to negotiate with them, and they basically want money. It's a business model. Those people want money. And the companies that mediate, they also want money. They charge 2.5, 3,000 euros to help you get rid of the illegal occupants of your property. Here, just going back, the previous question was about banks. So one of the first things we do is we introduce our clients to different banks in Spain as well to help look at mortgage simulations and request them. So I prepare the questions we need to ask to the banks, or just to the banks, make introductions. I look at your mortgage proposals together with you, etc. There's a question on price regulations on renting out. We talked about that. Jarek, another question. Is there any chance to get a mortgage in the Spanish bank while I'm not a Spanish resident? I may have some cash as a deposit. I have a full-time job in the UK. Okay, so yes, you can perfectly get a mortgage as a non-resident. Actually, half of our clients are non-residents approximately. The only thing that changes are the conditions of the mortgage, the terms and conditions. What does it mean? If you are the percentage loan to value, so the percentage of the purchase price that the banks can finance through a mortgage changes. And as a non-resident, probably or typically the banks can finance 60%, meaning you need around 40% as a down payment. As a resident, so even you don't need to be Spanish, as a foreign resident in Spain, financing is easy up to 80%, sometimes 90% as well. Assuming you only have one property, the one that you buy. If you have other guarantees for the bank, things can become a lot easier. That is a percentages to keep in mind. You have buying costs in Spain. There's one 10% purchase tax, for instance. Some banks can include it. So when I say 60% finance, 40% down payment as non-resident, it can be 40, it could be 50% you need if you take the taxes into account. Indicative, but certainly possible to do that. Again, the conditions are the same. You need to have a certain down payment available, and so you can do the numbers. If you have 100K, assume that is 40% of what you can buy. Do you only deal with apartments, or will you assist with rural properties such as fincas? No, we do both. We do different types of property. So apartments in the city center, of course, or apartments in Sitges, on the Costa Brava, on the Costa Blanca, of course. Houses, logically as well. It can be villas with a pool, with a garden that are ready to move in. We help people buy properties that need a lot of renovation. That's often fincas, macias, the rural properties. Then there's other elements that come into play. It's not just about a technical inspection. They need to look as well at the licenses, the urban planning, or urban plans that the city council might have, technical requirements as well. We help people as well buy buildings or hotels or hotels or similar bed and breakfast buildings, let's say. Again, there the due diligence is completely different, and it's not just a property, the whole legal administrative part as well that comes into play here. So yeah, just there is testimonials on our website or on the YouTube channel. Sorry, we can put a link of the YouTube channel probably here, of people that explain how we help them buy a good masia, a good finca, and also someone explains how we help them stopping from buying the wrong finca 7 times, I think he said, because they loved it every time, and they said no, this is not a good purchase, so we stopped them from buying. Is it possible to secure tourist licenses outside of the Barcelona metropolitan area, example in Valles Oriental, and in rural areas? Tourist licenses depends on the local city council, so it's very diverse. And even if you would take the coast north from Barcelona, for instance, you need to look at case by case, city council by city council, what is possible. But yes, in quite some areas, you can still get a license, which is obviously interesting, even if you might never use it. It's inexpensive and fairly easy to request and to obtain the license, and it adds additional value to your property. But you need a license for tourist rentals, and tourist rentals again are everything between 1 day and 1 month. You don't need it if you rent it out for more than 1 month. So again, this is something we help you with. If somebody's interested in tourist licenses for Barcelona city, it's more complex. It's a bit more complex there. There was a stop on the transmission of tourist licenses. Didn't come in the news. Was a very silent decision by the politicians. That's now being discussed. Can be shortly transferred again. There's some more checks to be performed. We have a case recently that we're working on now where the tourist apartment is a very profitable apartment. The owners set up many years ago a legal entity to own the apartment, but the tourist license is on a private person's name, not on the company's name. So if you want to buy that apartment now, there's a lot of things. You buy the company, you buy the apartment. What about transmitting the tourist license? So a lot of complexity, and surprisingly. No, it's not surprising. It was a joke, and surprisingly enough, as a joke, the agent did not mention this. Of course, the agent just wanted the buyer to sign a document, pay a lot of money for the property, saying there's a tourist license linked to this, and 3 weeks later, we still don't have all the documents from the seller because they don't have some of the documents, and they need to sort it out first. Okay, so just as a side note, we've pasted a link in here. I see to our YouTube channel. There's a lot of videos on YouTube. All the webinars are there, but also shorter videos, also videos of international people like yourself, who a few months ago were in all these webinars. In the meanwhile, we help them buy a property, and we ask them a very simple question when they buy it. To say, what would you like to share today, or that you've bought, with people who are today at a situation that you were in 4, 5, 6 months ago? And we give them 1 or 2 minutes, and it's interesting sharing of experience. Sandra's asking a question: What are the lenders, the banks? I think you mean providing mortgages in US dollars. But there's some banks who do it. I've seen. Let's see. I can't make publicity for banks here, I think. But I've seen Caixa doing it. I believe Santander can do it under some constraints. But it's to be looked at case by case, and to be looked at if it is interesting to do it in US dollars, of course. I think, did I miss? Yeah, I missed someone here. Sorry. What are the best areas to purchase in Barcelona? Martin asks. If you buy to live, to use yourself, there's a very personal dimension to this, of course. You need to like the area. If you want to invest, which I think, Martin, might be your situation, the panorama has changed, because I mentioned in the beginning of the session that prices dropped in the last 2 years. But some prices have dropped more. Some areas has lost a lot more than what most people expected, and they've not recovered yet. Example is Borne in Barcelona, very central, beautiful, historic area, where prices were sky high until beginning of 2020, before COVID. But it's an area where there's, I mean, all the buyers there are international buyers, and they just disappeared. So you see now, as an example, you see prices in Borne today that are 15–20% lower than what they were 2 years ago. And it's massive. It's a massive difference. And there's no buyers there. They're coming back now, but until Easter, again, there were no international buyers. Barcelona was empty. So they're coming back now. That's an example of an area which lost a lot. But again, to make rental income, you also need to have international tenants, of course. If you want to rent to, if you want to flip property, so buy, renovate, sell again, you have an opportunity here to buy lower. The question is, are all the international buyers going to come back to this Born area, which is very charming and one of the most pleasant places, I think, in the city. But at the moment, they are not there. So we see that is happening there. We see as well in, for instance, Eixample in Barcelona and Sitges, more prominent central area with the parallel streets. Prices dropped during COVID because similar reasons. They picked up quicker. They didn't drop that much as in Born, but picked up quicker again because the amount is back. Locals like to buy in Eixample as well. Locals don't like to buy that much in Born, so that demand is there again because of inflation and interest rates. It will go up further and so on. If it's a pure ROI calculation, tier 2 areas or even tier 3 areas like San Andreu, like now Barris, are areas to consider, because in those areas, what happened is that property purchase prices dropped more than the rental prices. So if you buy with the idea to rent it out, you make like an immediate win, an immediate gain on your purchase. Because of the social mix of people living there, there's people who will they will always be renting, probably not buying. Okay. Hope I clarified your question there, Martin. But again, I think Barcelona, there is still good deals. Depends who, if it's an investment, depends who is your target buyer or target tenant in the future. And if you compete in the international segment, then there is going to be more pressure and less price negotiation maybe. A lot of our properties that we find for clients are actually off-market properties, so properties that are not listed on any of the listing sites. We get preferential access, know it first, and therefore they're often bought. There's a video on the YouTube channel from Eugenio, an Italian guy, and he explained his purchase possibilities were to buy something not very central for the budget, and we found an attico with a private terrace with fantastic views under the market price. So these things happen as well. Another question on the banks here. Are banks the only ones who give mortgages? Are there mortgage brokers? Good question, Sandra. Yes, there are mortgage brokers as well. We work with both. Actually, when we introduce you to banks, we often get you in touch with a few banks and one broker. Different broker depending on your profile, because they access often more different banks. But the brokers have the same challenge today. The challenge is that it's an additional person in between you and the banks, and the brokers they can't push harder. They said even they go with lot of volume, a lot of transactions every month. They don't get quick responses from the banks. Brokers are, I think, there's brokers that you pay as a buyer, there's brokers that you don't pay as a buyer. We typically look at your situation and in terms of the in function of the complexity and how difficult it might be to get a mortgage or how specific your situation is. Sometimes it's worth to have like a broker you pay for, so you know it's going to be really fighting to get the best possible deal for you. Feel free to reach out, Sandra. I can have if I understand your situation better, I can give you probably better advice as well. Burton says, how complicated is it to have a house renovated at the moment? Delays, prices, shortage in raw materials, workers, etc. If you, somebody joining us, if you don't have a relationship with a construction company or an architect and you start from zero, it might be complicated, but I think it's really not impossible. Delays, not because of the workers or the capacity from these companies, no. Delays and price impacts from the supply chain. When raw materials either go up in price or simply do not arrive. You order them and then they say, whatever, 2 weeks delivery, and in 2 weeks they say, well, actually we don't have it and we don't know when it will arrive. That's the problem. There's a bit of uncertainty. trying to lock in prices, mainly for everything which is metal and copper and structural work, etc. For a house, wood as well. These prices are going up, but it's probably possible to do. I didn't mention this in the beginning, but to be as Inspire, we actually started and still very active as we invest in properties as well. So we buy property that we renovate and then rent out or sell, depending on the business case. We're actively doing this, and we still meet the same timelines as before, but we're also experienced in doing this, and we run it every day. So what are the channels you use to find properties at fair prices? Yeah, I see. We're going over time here, but if I'm happy to keep going. If you guys stay on, this is your session. Ask the questions. What are the channels you use to find properties at fair prices? There's a lot of websites, of course, that are public. You can look at them. The largest listing site is Idealista. And there's a good and a bad thing about this. The good thing is a lot of properties are on there. The bad thing is a lot of duplication on there. One property often with different agents listed, often at different prices, with different descriptions, with different square meters. So it can be confusing as well. So which agent do you contact? If you don't know them, that is an interesting source to look for properties. There is Fotocasa, there is Jijncontré, there is Pisos.com. There's several sites, but again, you will see a lot of duplication coming when you search these sites. I think Idealista is probably the best filter mechanism. You can even draw your own area and filter. Some other sites are a bit more constrained on that side. But that's one side one option that you can use. We have people that they wake up in the morning and the first thing they do is they look at the listing site. We have tools to monitor this, etc. That's one source. Other sources are of the network. We've built a network of people in the sector over the years, and the examples I gave of the off-market properties, they are not on Idealista, they're off-market, and that is through the network. When we help you as a buyer, we need to know very clearly upfront and a lot of detail. How does your dream property look like? How should the ideal investment look like, etc. And then we can search. We can also speak to our network. I mean, we call, we email people, we go and see people personally to explain them what our customers are looking for today. And then, because there's no list of off-market properties, also for the contacts in the sector, not. So when they get a product and the property coming into their office, let's say, that meets the requirements, then we can do the matchmaking. We get a call, say, hey, Anna and our team is the first one to go and see such properties, or Kim. We are the first one to see the property. It's very simple. And if we like it, if it passes our filters, do some initial checks on it, we can make a conditional offer on them. It never comes on the market. But it's a network of agencies, of lawyers, of notaries. Who knows? Who's the first person who knows about an inheritance? It's not the agency. It's probably the notary or lawyer, right? As an example. Or maybe the person administrating the building, the condo. So that's a network we built up, which is very time and effort intense to maintain, but it works very well. Okay. A question from Gerardo. Areas outside Barcelona which could be interesting in terms of investments? It's a question. Yeah, depends on how you define a good investment, Gerardo. Everybody has a different definition of what is a good investment. You can buy a part. There's many good options, huh? But in my opinion, when you there's three groups of areas. There's the big cities, Barcelona, Madrid, for instance. There is the coast, Costa Brava, Alicante coast, whatever. And then there is smaller villages around the big cities, metropolitan areas, for instance. Metropolitan areas, to start with that, they are typically not very touristic. It's local. It's local people. It's a market that depends probably a bit more on the economy, etc., with ups and downs. But it's stable, long-term tenants. If you like that, why not? And if you go to such areas, the prices are a lot lower than in Barcelona. It can be half the price or less than half the price. For instance, in Barcelona, if you compare the very center to Horta is an area 30, 40 minutes by public transport from, say, the very center. More green, a lot more local people there. Prices drop easily 30%. If you go a bit further to some villages, this might happen as well. So that can be interesting, but if the budget is constrained, why not? The coast, interesting. You need tourists there, and the tourists also mean seasonability. So there's less predictability. It's very good in summer. If you have a tourist license, but you need to manage these things as well. So a lot of your fees, 20, 30%, might go to people managing your tourist apartment then. So that's a question, is it worth to make that trade-off? There's also fiscal implications. If you buy a property in a normal local area and you rent it out to people who use it as a main residence, a 5-year contract, you get tax benefits as well. So that it's not only about the location. In my opinion, I have a strong preference for investing in the city, in Barcelona, because in my opinion, you need a few things to make a good investment. One is maximize your rental income. So rental income basically is a combination of the rent you can ask per month multiplied by the occupancy rates. How many months or days per year can you rent out the property, and for what price? Now, that occupancy rate is very high in Barcelona center, excepting the last 2 COVID years. And it is a lot more variable if you go to the coast, for instance, more seasonability. With our rental apartments, we get, for the tourist rentals, 92% occupancy. And probably we end up higher for this year. That's very, very high. And for long-term rentals, you can get very close to nearly 100%. If the tenants don't change. So you need predictability on the rental income side. That's one thing. And you have that in a city like Barcelona. There is demand on the rental market. You need to choose your right segment. I like the segment where the international tenants look for properties. They like nicer properties at good locations, but they're happy with small properties as well. If there's some light and they have a desk to work from, and there's public transport and so on. There's a lot of demand there. I like that segment. The second thing you need is, as an investment, a property market that can grow, that can gain value in the future. And for a market to appreciate, to gain value, you don't have enough with just a local demand. You need international demand on the market. That is a strong incentive to drive prices upward in the future. Barcelona is the only cosmopolitan city in Europe at the seaside. You see the big companies, they don't go to Alicante or Valencia. They're very nice cities, but you're in Barcelona. And that brings international talent here. Those people need rents. Those people over time, they buy properties, and that is, they have typically higher incomes than many local people. So in my opinion, there's a strong argument for a city like Barcelona if you pick the right area, the right type of tenant, the right risk profile, and so on. Okay. One of the first things we do, I said, is with clients is there's 2 things we do initially. It's all about preparation before looking at properties. One is, I need to understand your financials very well. So how much savings do you have? What is your income? Do you want to finance it with a mortgage, yes or no? And then start thinking about how could that end result look like, which banks and so on, or which other bank. We need to understand that. That gives us a number. That gives us typically a maximum budget. So property purchase price plus the taxes, plus a notary, plus a land registry, plus our fees, everything that you need to involve from a cost point of view, what is possible. And then we sit down, we have a proper workshop in the office or over Zoom if you're not in Barcelona. And that's about setting or defining the ideal property, realistic expectations, and a good plan to start with. And it's a combination of what do you want as, if you buy the property to live yourself, your lifestyle, what makes you happy in Barcelona, what is important, or on the coast, doesn't matter. 2, we know the budget from the previous conversation with the banks. 3, which areas do you prefer, like, or maybe like, or certainly do not like? Location drives price a lot. And 4 is, what property features do you need? How big, how beautiful, ready to move in or to renovate, open kitchen, closed kitchen, terrace, south or north orientation, evening sun, morning sun, elevator, old building, new building. There's so many parameters we need to discuss it, because the ideal property, there's no single definition of that. We sit in the meeting room together or over Zoom, we have properties on the screens, a map of Barcelona or whichever area we look at the table, color markers, and we challenge your thinking, and it's all about understanding the ranking of your priorities. What is most important to you? And typically after such an initial workshop, people really say, okay, I think I've been searching inefficiently in the past. I've been looking for things that didn't exist. I didn't know that some areas were cheaper in Barcelona, for instance, than other areas. I didn't know that this was possible. So now I can search in a lot more focused manner. And then we see that after such a workshop, many of our buyers, within a question of weeks, they find the property, even search themselves, or we can search for the property, we can source the market, screen the market. We can move very quickly, but that alignment is important. Somebody's asking, what are your fees? I hope that's okay to ask. It's of course good to ask. I don't share, we don't have a fee table that I can just show you here on screen, and I would never do it anyway. Depends on the complexity, on what needs to happen. One key parameter that impacts the fees is, for instance, we have people that come to us and say, look, I've seen this property. I would like to buy this. Can you help me? Can you give me the guarantees? I don't want to make mistakes. Okay, so then we don't need to talk about 5 or 10 properties. It's one property. Yeah? And other people say, I want to buy, I'm renting, I want to buy something. I would like your help with speaking to the banks, and then I would like you to search the properties for me. So then we pre-visit the properties departments in Barcelona, actually, and only the properties that pass our filters, also during the visit, which is done by by Kim and our team, like 30 years of experience under her belt, architect by training, so very good eye for good properties. If they pass our filters, then we go and see them with you. So you save 80–90% of your visits and the visits time and the time talking to agencies. We take care of that. And then if you like one, then we start, we do the initial checks, we benchmark the price, we negotiate, we submit an offer, due diligence, technical inspection, all these things. We go to notary with you, we help you with the mortgage if required. So it's a different scope of work, but it's basically these two groups. So do you want to search yourselves, or do you want us to search? That impacts the fees, of course, but also you get a little more value with the other model. And then it depends if you say, I've seen a property already, or I'm in the process of searching, and therefore you talk about different properties. That's my general response to this. I think so far, all our clients, and they say this publicly in the videos on YouTube, they say like the fees pay themselves back, because we negotiate very, very hard. We know when to walk away from a property, so it pays itself back. But also the certainty that you don't make mistakes, that you know that you're buying the right property. It's hard to quantify that, but that gives a lot of peace of mind to people as well. Also getting better mortgages is also a financial benefit directly. So Lee, drop us a short email. I will send you a few questions to understand your situation better. We use a buyer wish list, a simple form that you can fill in. And then I'll take a look at it. We get on a Zoom call and I can give you a proper response and specific fees. Okay. Let's see. So quite some people on here. That's good. I think I'm through the questions. Is there anybody else who wants to take the opportunity and and ask more questions. I try to keep my part short this time. And again, I say, for more content, the YouTube videos, there's a lot of content on it, on mortgages in Spain, on renovations, on the buying process, on typical buyer dilemmas that you will have, lots of different topics. There's articles as well on our blog that you can take a look at. Okay. So if no further questions, we will close the webinar here. So I thank you very much. I'll be in contact in the near future. Yeah, thank you. Forward to that. You have my contact data. Be in touch. If you decide to buy a property, keep these things in mind. And maybe one webinar to look at is the mistakes to avoid. I think it's the previous, is number 13, I think. Mistakes to avoid as a foreign buyer. You might find that useful. Thanks a lot, and I wish you a very good evening. Bye-bye.